You're listening to the Gruntworkers Show, and I'm your host, James C. Zollman. Here's one of my favorite snippets from this episode.
One thing I thought was really fascinating was in San Francisco, some drag performers, they couldn't work anymore, right? Because you can't have a theater full of people. So they started delivering food. So you get dinner and a show. They perform outside of your house.
Huh.
I'm like, that's so cool. Yeah. So I'm like looking at what people are doing.
Welcome to the Gruntworkers Show. I'm so excited for this episode today because we have another rock star on the show, somebody with a vast amount of experience. And I love having these exceptionally experienced people on the show. This one is no exception as far as just being a master of her work. And that's the type of people that we're trying to bring to the show here. So I'm incredibly honored to have Mary here today. Mary Brodie. She is the founder and experienced strategist at Gearmark. Thank you, and welcome to the show, Mary.
Well, thank you, James. It's so wonderful to be here.
Great. Well, let's kick it off with a question about your title here. What's it like being an experienced strategist in 2020 with this pandemic?
Yeah, so all along before, I tend to focus more on the digital side. So I'll work on anything from like websites to apps to lead gen to content strategies, right? And I've even worked in call centers, right? So I'm familiar with like call flows and mapping that out. And focusing on how the customer is experiencing the company and how is the brand being communicated to them through the experience. Because I think sometimes we forget like that, you know, how you're clicking through and how it like a call goes, right? That all is part of that experience. And then when 2020 hit, I know one of the things that I've been doing is I took a step back and I'm like, well, what's going to be a trend? Because I'm like, this is interesting. Like I did a thought experiment for myself. What's a trend going to be? And I started looking at all the things happening. Like one thing I thought was really fascinating was in San Francisco, some drag performers, they couldn't work anymore, right? Because you can't have a theater full of people. So they started delivering food. So you get dinner and a show. They perform outside of your house.
Huh.
I'm like, that's so cool. Yeah. So I'm like looking at what people are doing because I'm like, this is kind of neat because you can't really interact with people, but you can be outside. So I'm looking at that. And then I was thinking about, you know, how is travel going to transform, you know, and one of the things that, you know, that's always existed all along, but I don't think we ever discussed was how dirty hotel rooms and restaurants are. Like we'd watch the black light from Gordon Ramsay, right? He'd go into a restaurant, do the black light, or even in a hotel, or they'd do these shows about it. And they were just, And so now with COVID, you can't have that, right? It's going to be squeaky clean. Yep. So now all the things that were kind of like now we've got to focus on that. So now cleanliness is a value. So I started thinking about what are all the different values, right? So I've seen like there are air purifiers now in airports, right? Or there's something that will kill like a virus, right? Because they're trying to get people to travel. The whole thing with masks, I'm looking forward to the day that they have like disposable masks in places, right? They just give it to you, right? Like, or maybe there's, or we have like COVID tests as if they're like pregnancy tests. And so I was thinking about all these different things. And then one fine day, I decided to read this book about dopamine. And this is when it's called The Molecule of More. And it talks about the impact of dopamine and how you see the world and how it's about seeing the future, right? And that's how you get motivated. And I was seeing all these people with a lot of angst about staying home. And before the show, we were talking about being more introverted, right? And I didn't really notice, didn't really bother me, right? I'm like, I'm okay with this. I'll just stay home. Yep. And but with a lot of friends, they were going nutty bonkers, right? It was really bothering them. And after I read the book on dopamine, I started realizing in some ways, I think we had dopamine addictions. Like there was lots of going out, lots of looking forward, not a lot of looking in. So now that we're all home, and we started clearing out our dopamine addictions, all right? We started realizing what's going on in life. What are our new values? So I think now we have new values that you're starting to see come up, like health and safety. I think we're going to see a lot more with that. The working from home, I think, is going to be a stronger, like the offices, that's going to start to phase out. I think corporate people who have their office towers and things, right? All the business space, that's going to start to fade away because the needs are fading away. And I think we're going to start to value other people, because I think we started to see that where what people's responses to George Floyd. And that to me was quite a turning point, because this isn't new. It's been happening all along. Mm-hmm. But I think people were home. There was nowhere to go. There's no dopamine going on, right? There's no future. You got to stay in your home within your four walls. It's the same four walls that you see every day. And now you're able to pay attention to what's happening to people. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's when everyone started caring about each other. I think we're going to see a lot more of that moving on, about how to connect with people. And also how to have better virtual experiences, because that's the next thing, is when you're home, everything looks the same. There's nothing new. And now you got to focus on one person, because if you go out, when you have if you go out to coffee with someone in that experience, you're having coffee, you're hearing music, you're seeing people walk in and out, you're hearing other conversations. I mean, how many times have you been out for coffee and you're like, did you hear that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it will be new. Everything will sound different. I see that.
So I think we're going to start to change our values and how we see things. I think it's going to be a lot less it's going to be a lot less about the transactional and more about how we're feeling and how is it helping others. Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be a big shift to help other people. And I think we're starting to see that need.
Fascinating. Wow. Being an experienced strategist now, and understanding that from what you're saying, it sounds like we're sort of entering this new age of authenticity. And yes. You are one of those leaders in the space that's helping to define that and thinking of all of these externalities. And I find that incredibly awesome. Now, your company name is called Gearmark, and this is where you're doing this experience strategizing and strategizing out of that company. How did you come up with that company name? And has it always been about the experience, or is this a new shift for you?
Oh, no, I was in more the user experience side. And then that's when I started realizing that things are moving more to conversations. And I had to shift my view that a click, and it actually is a conversation. It's just the way we're interfacing with devices had to be click and has to be keyboard. Because, computers can't really understand voice as well yet, right? They're getting much, much better now. So before you know it, it's going to be you just talk and you get a result and you start having a conversation with a device. But I started off in user experience, and then it evolved into the larger conversations. I actually went back to school for corporate communications, so I better understand how to communicate from that more corporate business level and get a more formal training in it. So I understand how technology can better help that and how interaction can help that. Gearmark comes from gear is the process and mark is the brand. Because from my perspective, experiences really are it's like your process and your brand is all together.
Awesome. I always love to find out the definition behind brand names. And I think yours sounds very strong, Gearmark. I just love the sound of it, Mary. But I also love that you've been involved and deeply entrenched in experience, it sounds like, for the majority of your career. And then you added, or you brought in, a deeper understanding of communications over the top of it, which makes everything about the conversation. Now, yes. You wrote a book about that, right? Yes.
Revenue or relationships win both. It started as a white paper.
Okay.
But it grew.
It grew a lot, I would say.
A lot to say.
That's awesome. So tell us about the book. What's the premise behind the book, and how does it help people today?
So what I wanted to do is try to help companies understand what's happened, right? Because a lot of this goes to digital transformation and automation. And some of the clients that I worked with, they'd say things like, it's those millennials, right? They changed everything. Or they'll come back with it's that social media thing, or whatever new trend was coming up. It's content strategy, the hot topic of the day. And it's like, actually, it's not. Automation, I think, allowed customers, like there were some quotes of, I forget who said it, but he was describing like, well, a company is like, they're in like this glass box and customers can see in, which is true, right? With automation, you can do that now. But I don't see it that way. I see it like it's a membrane. Like your customers just walk right into the middle of your business. And they expect that now. Like when you call like for, even for like financial account issues, like you almost expect to talk to accounting and say, what the heck did you do? Like what's wrong with my account and how do I rectify it?
Yes.
You want, and you expect people to have all that insider information. And then there's this whole thing of what happened and what does that all mean, right? What does this mean that your customers in your business, and what do you have to do as a company? And then this gets back to a lot of the old fashioned practices that I think people forgot.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need a vision. You need your mission statement. You need that well thought out. You need to know who your customers are. You know, and now customers care not just like what you do. They want to know how you do it. Because sometimes they want to be involved in it.
Yes. User generated. Yeah. Yeah. User generated everything. Content, data,
Yes.
conversation. Yep.
And they're involved with your business. So how do you leverage that? And that's where I started realizing too, that the output of business, like it's really the relationship, right? And there's different aspects of that relationship. So you'll have engagement, right? Loyalty, brand, a lot of different PR activities, right? To me, that's the different stakeholders. And then revenue, right? Like that's like one output, but there's all these other outputs and they all kind of influence each other. Because that was another thing I observed with companies is that like sometimes they would have such great engagement and their revenue was challenged. And they would sometimes say, well, you know, we've got like all these people. And I'm like, yeah, but something's going on because you got this following and they're not buying. So something's wrong. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just look at the bottom line, you'd say we're a failure. Maybe you're not a failure. So it's like, I try to think about can you look at this a little differently to see how can we make the revenue better, like make it consistent across. Because even if you have, let's say you have great revenue, great engagement and terrible loyalty, well, something's wrong because that shouldn't be happening. You should have the great revenue, the great engagement, great loyalty. So something's missing. It might be through your customer service isn't great. People are buying, they're not staying. So it's like, how can you look at this in a different way to maybe build up your business? Another example I use is what if your market is saturated? Right. That's another thing that I don't have this in the book, but it's part of a larger thing I've been thinking about, right? Like you might be having conversations with people that like their companies you just might not be naturally fit to connect with. Mm-hmm. And they have a different partner and and that relationship's so strong. What are you doing? Why are you trying to break it? It's not going to break, right? Because business is about relationships. When you look at it from that angle, it's a whole different world, really.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Sounds like an amazing book. I'm going to have to pick it up after the show here. What's your take? I love everything about experience. I love the authentic persona that companies need these days. And I love the strategizing around that. What's your take on chatbots and these other technologies that are coming out that allow a conversation to happen, but it's with a robot?
Yeah, so I like to talk about that as automated conversations. And I think they're necessary. I think you need to have them. I think they only go to a certain level of depth, though, because there comes to a certain point that you need emotion, because it might be about something that's very personal or something that might be more sensitive, or it might be a conversation that's quite complex and needs a lot of options. I think chatbots do a great job of, let's say, informational types of conversations, transactional. But if you're going to get to like collaboration and decision making, that's not going to happen with a chatbot, or at least not today, right? Maybe in the future, but I don't think our automated conversations right now really go that far. We're more along the lines. It can help with decision making, like here are 5 options. But it's not going to, and it might help you compare them, but that's about it. Like if you ask them like, well, here's my situation. How can you help me? We're done.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
You need a human.
Yes, of course. So what are you seeing in the marketplace, and as speaking to the trends, but also to what you're seeing right now as far as how is conversation and this authenticity, authentic, I guess, reality coming to play in terms of revenue. Do you have any specific campaigns that you can discuss where you saw a change or a shift in the conversation or the experience that you were able to help pioneer that translated into a massive success for a company?
Well, I work a lot with B2B companies.
Mm-hmm.
And right now what I'm noticing is that, like, one in particular is a startup that needs funding, and funding has been quite challenging right now.
Yes.
So that will push that one aside. But when it comes to other companies, what's been happening is before they would have in-person events, right? Which is much easier for salespeople to connect with people, and you can read people easier and all of that. And now all the events are virtual. So what does this mean? And I think one thing is, that people talk about the Zoom fatigue. Again, you're focused on the screen and you don't have any distraction, right? Even at an event, you'd be like, where's my coffee? I want a water. Where's a cookie? Yes. Right? Oh, look, who's that? Right? So now you're just in your room. So the attendees aren't really networking like they were before with the event, which was an opportunity for them. I think now we're also seeing there's a lot of content being produced, which is absolutely fantastic. But what are we going to do with it? Right? Because if you don't use it properly to tell your story or to help people connect with your company in some way, like, what are we creating? So how do we now, I think there's a bit of a scramble for companies. So how do we get leads? And that's where I kind of see there's a role for social media in this. And I think LinkedIn has kind of not necessarily connected people, but they've made themselves a little engine, because I know you get these emails of, like, a gazillion a day, like, do you want to buy an X or a Y or a Z? And that's not how you do sales. Like, no, like, what are you doing? Like, I just want to send emails back sometimes and go, no, sorry, like, can I help you? This isn't going to work. But you can build those brand relationships. And I'm finding that that's starting to happen more and more. People are almost craving that. And I'm also finding that in different professional networking circles, people are craving a one-on-one connection. And they are trying to achieve that. So I think we're going to see a shift in how marketing happens. I think it's still in flux, and it's going to be that way for a while. Because I think it's trying to find out what, again, it's the new value, valuing people, caring about people, culture and brand's going to matter, right? I think it's going to be a lot about partnerships. Like, here are like, and that's one trend I am seeing. Like, companies now go out together. Like, here's a federation, right? Maybe 2 to 5 companies. We're going to have a discussion.
I like that.
And I think, and I think, we're going to see more of that. And I think we're going to see more of some way for people to interact too. They're going to have to allow that, because that's what people, I think, are missing.
Absolutely. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think a couple of tactics that you brought up in there that people can test and work on. I really love that federation idea, and I hadn't really thought of that literally until now, that partnering with other companies, whether they're similar or are complementary, is a fantastic, brilliant idea to increase the conversation and to bring in a shared audience that all need the same thing. But on the other side of that, one thing that you said that I absolutely love, Mary, is that you said people are craving the one-to-one interaction, especially right now. And I think you're 110% spot on. So that's pure brilliance. Thank you so much for sharing that with us at this moment. Now, you kind of benched the startup that you were talking about earlier in the answer to that kind of stacked question. I tend to ask these questions where I stack 4 or 5 questions into one jumble. So thanks for navigating through that. Let's go back to that startup. Was that a campaign that you participated in, increasing the conversation, or what can you share about that?
Oh, yeah. So that one, I've been working on their product for a few years now. Yeah. So it's been more on the product experience.
Okay.
And it's quite a different audience. And it gets to, I think sometimes we think that all different fields have been automated, and they haven't. There's still a lot of room and a lot of opportunity to automate like a lot of more fields in, let's say, manufacturing. And maybe it's not on the floor in the plant, but it might be, let's say, in the purchasing side. Because there's a lot of very complex products out there. And so this kind of shows, like when we hear things like oil and gas, right? And they use the little robots to go in to clean them, right? So they can schedule things better and save money. Like, and this gets to the whole AI robot story, right? And how that all works. But there's a lot of room. This gets to like some places I'd say we're in an interesting spot where some companies are at 1.0 automation and some are at 3.0. And in some ways you can leapfrog some of that. And I think we're going to start seeing that. Like a lot of companies are going to start catching up because they're going to realize how much they can really save when they start really seeing this happen. And I think we've been a little stuck, but that'll
okay. Yeah. So what have you seen? You've mentioned this on the call, and I believe it's mentioned in your book too. What have you seen, and how can people measure turning conversations into revenue? It seems so top of funnel. Are you seeing any special way that companies are measuring that and directly translating that into bottom line dollars? If you are, how?
Yeah, it comes to from my perspective, it goes through the whole content analysis, right? To do content analysis on the pieces that are doing well, to find out what conversations are succeeding. You might notice that there are, like, let's say, conversations with salespeople, right? Some of the conversations they're having, they tend to, what are the themes? Who's calling? Like, what are the connection points? Using the same content analysis techniques, you can use it on social to get just incredible insights about what's happening, right? Where are people connecting? What hashtags do they use? And it makes a difference, right? Because you might notice some trends that you're like, okay, what if we capitalized on that? And again, it kind of goes to the whole thing of, if revenue is one output and engagement is another output, right? How do they correlate? And what trends can you notice about what's happening with your revenue? So if you have a lot of loyal customers, but not a lot of engagement, well, what if you bumped up your engagement? And I'm willing, and I'll tell, you're going to start seeing your revenue go up, right? So there might be a clog somewhere. And I think that's where, if you look at it that way and do some content analysis through your call center with your calls, with the materials that you create, find out what people are reading, what aren't they reading? Are you missing an opportunity? And don't just see it as, oh, they don't read this. They might not read this because they can't find it, because they don't know they need it. Because people forget that about their customers. They think they know their problem. No, they don't. They don't know their problem.
Yes. You have to help them define that problem. Yeah,
and maybe that's not happening. Maybe they don't see their problem as what you think their problem is, right? So this can help you identify where your problems are, so you can start opening up that funnel to get the money.
Wonderful. So as far as measuring it goes, then it sounds like you measure where you're at right now, increase your engagement, and watch where you're at and where it goes. And if you don't see the revenue and engagement match up, then you have a clog in there, and you need to do a deep analysis and a deep dive. And you need to talk to Gearworks, or is that, Gearmark, sorry. Gearmark. I'm thinking Grunt Workers for some reason, for the Grunt Workers show, and Gear, so Gearworks. Anyways, Gearmark. Now everybody will remember Gearmark with Mary. And that's wonderful. That's I love that idea of measuring both now and then increasing your engagement and then taking a look at it later to see if it boosted things, and if it doesn't, take a deep look at where the problems might be. Interesting, very interesting, Mary. So let's kind of zoom back out a little bit. How did you get started in this industry? Your career is fantastic. You have a lot of experience. You are one of the few who started into user experience kind of early on. So what was the catalyst for that? How did you get started?
I fell into it by accident.
Oh, I love those kinds of stories. How did that happen?
So I got a job at a chemical engineering software company in their call center, and they needed help with the website because they wanted to try to save money on certain types of calls. But working in the call center, I ended up learning a lot about call center and customer service, right? And customer experience and how the customers could have a great experience. And then also got quite involved with the web. And then I ended up going into their marketing department, and there we go.
And the rest is history. So it was accidental. That's awesome. And how did you pivot from user experience to, well, I guess you did already address the web experience side, but adding that communications piece, you decided at some points to go and get a degree. What kind of spun that off? What inspired you to get that communications degree to match both user experience up to communications?
So I was working on a company's, one of their divisions websites, and things were actually really going smoothly at this point. So I came in and things were a rough road, got them so smooth sailing. And there was also a lead gen component that came out of online chat. So got those guys trained up, got them running like a clock, right? Everything's working great. So I'm like, well, this is kind of like, I need something new, right? I need something new to do. So I started looking at, and this is where I also started realizing it was in IT. And, these IT guys have all their stories and they don't share their stories. So then I started looking into things like user-generated content and how do we get these IT guys at that point in time. A lot of them, they really weren't active on social media, right? Because it just wasn't, they didn't see the value, right? But they had a lot of stories to share. And that's when I started looking at, even in B2B, right? These are people. So how do you engage with people? And how do you, and especially if they share their story, they're going to be loyal to the brand. They're going to love, right? And that's when we started realizing a lot of times is why are they choosing what they're choosing? What are they looking for in the brand? What about the brand do they like? Right? And you start to read their stories and you start to see a lot of, you start to see a tale, that weaves through, and some themes that weave throughout. So that's when I started getting into that. And then I started working into, in content strategy. And that's where I started also picked up one of my favorite analysis to do is why people don't buy. Because to me, that's why did they not buy? And no one's going to tell you, you got to do additional research to figure this out. Because if you ask them why didn't you buy, they're always going to say money, and that's not true. Right? It's never money. It's something else.
Yes.
And help them get over that hump, right? Provide them with the content to get over that hump, but also to build that emotional connection. Because especially IT, marketing gets yay, marketing did a great campaign, right? Finance, yay, finance saved money. Sales sold something big. IT, right? Outlook was down for 5 minutes on Christmas Day.
Yeah,
so,
busted.
Yeah.
Yep. Interesting. Fascinating. So you saw all these opportunities to tell stories, and that drove you to, hey, this is an opportunity for me to enter communications and to bring that into the user experience space. Is that what I hear you?
Yes. Yes. Because that's when I started seeing there was a merger that's happening. And then also working on projects and products for chatbots. And that's why I started seeing early stage chatbots. We're not there with the technology. We need so much more technology for that to really work. Again, you have different layers of conversations. Theirs are 6 or something. And we're only at 2.
Yes.
We got a way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's not like engaging with a human just yet. People know that chatbots are chatbots. Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And then there was also other things different interactions, when they were trying to do the, you could do a symbol or something, the drawing, whatever, the gestures. And I was that's not going to last. And it hasn't really
I haven't seen that anywhere.
No.
So, yeah, you're right. It didn't last.
Yeah, it's I think because it's a different form of a keyboard, and I think people want to move away from that, and they want to move to a voice command. Ideally, you're talking to your computer like you talk to a person, and then now you can start seeing, right? This is where you have everything's a conversation.
Everything's a conversation. Absolutely. Mary, you said a question that I want to repeat real quick because I think it's incredibly valuable for the listeners and watchers today. find out and find a way to ask your customers why, or maybe they're non-customers, actually. A lot of times they're non-customers because they didn't buy, but why didn't you buy? I think that's a brilliant question to ask. So thank you for bringing that up, Mary. Let's take the professional cap off. Let's say you hang your hat as you walk in from the professional door. I mean, of course, all of us are working from home. So however that looks for you or anybody listening, let's say, Mary, you're at the end of your day. You're putting the professional side away. What does life look like for you outside of work? Do you have any hobbies that people maybe don't know so much about? What are you doing for fun?
So let's see. One of the things that I do work on is a friend of mine has an organization that's centered around human rights and justice. And so I help her with that. Yeah. So she was working on recently building awareness for the UN's Universal Process Review, the UPR, because the US was recently reviewed. So I'll work with her on that. And I do like some communications for that to help build awareness. So I'm starting to do that for like different not-for-profits and help them out. And then I also do I do work out, like fitness and health. You know, I'm vegan, right?
Okay.
Which I kind of fell into that too. There was one fine day I just didn't want to eat meat anymore.
How long ago was that?
Now about 3 years. It's really
Wow,
funny.
3 years. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What's I mean, you say it's one fine day. Was it just this sudden revelation, or have you been studying it?
Well, I think that's where this kind of came from. Is that I started realizing it was like a lot of health benefits. Mm-hmm. So at that point, there was a lot of focus. When you're working out quite a bit, there comes a point where you're like, what I put into my body really does matter. Sure. You know, and do I want to continue like certain abuses when I don't have to? Sure. And I have to do extra work at the gym. Like, why am I making this so hard? Yeah. So at the gym, is there anything you like to do that you would consider a hobby? Are you like a runner, a weightlifter, rower, biker? Before COVID, I did boxing.
Oh, awesome. I love boxing.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes. It was so much fun. I miss it a lot, but the good news of what I've been doing is I've been working out at home with this program, Heather Robertson. All right. It's a video program. Okay. And there's a lot of work for upper body strength, and that's always been a weakness. So now I'm working with 10-pound weights, which is a big deal for me because about maybe 6 months ago, I couldn't even do a 2-pound weight. Right.
Wow.
So yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. And so I'm really excited about that. And now I can go back to boxing when we get to go back to see when things aren't so dangerous. Sure. I can go back to boxing, and I'm like, maybe I'll be able to do better. Yeah.
So do you have a heavy bag at home?
No,
or was it
I didn't.
Kickboxing, or was it?
Oh, it was when I went to the gym. It was regular boxing. I took kickboxing. Yeah, I tried kickboxing.
It's a totally different sport. It's tough, isn't it? Yep.
Oh, tough is an understatement.
Yeah.
My whole body would be sore for days. Sore for days.
I understand. I've heard it's a very, very tough sport. That's probably why I haven't ever really tried it or gave it a chance myself. That's awesome, Mary. So they say that you're the average of the 5 people you're around most. In the age of COVID, that's kind of changed, right? And I've heard a couple of very cool answers. Some of it are consumption as far as a brand goes, because you're consuming the media or having that conversation with a brand, or it is a person. But who are those people, or what are those brands for you?
That's interesting. I know one of the things I do consume now is a lot more digital media, like the Netflix and the Hulu. Sure. And the Amazon, like Amazon Prime. And then I also read, my the books I get are also through Amazon.
Yes.
So I'd say that that's a huge interaction there. I know when it comes to shopping, to get like food products, it's Trader Joe's, because that's gone really well. And otherwise, with brand interactions, Target. A lot of Target.
And all of this is online now, right? So everything's online. How about the people side? Are there people that you're following, whether it's for boxing, whether it's for veganism, whether it's for professionalism? Who are those people that you're learning from, and who is this combination that is Mary? I guess another way to ask this is, who have been your heroes that you've sort of surrounded yourself with their materials? I know you're a reader. I love books. Yeah. I'm going to look up that dopamine book, which I think is fascinating, by the way. The whole chemical that your body creates to give you joy just blows my mind. Which I love that recommendation. Absolutely love that. Who else are you reading? Who else are you following?
So Brene Brown, right?
Ooh, love Brene Brown. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're into people, you have to have a dose of Brene Brown.
Oh, yes.
One of the biggest inspirations for me actually is Bernie Sanders.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And the moment this goes beyond political. It goes to not giving up. Because sometimes you have days that you're feeling really down and like, why do I bother? Or what am I doing? Right. Especially when, because I do more traditional marketing programs for people, right? The regular content, right? And the standard. But then I also have my ideas, and sometimes they're perceived as like, oh, those crazy ideas, right? Like, what do you mean? Like your loyalty should correspond with your brand and your engagement and your revenue, right? Those should all coincide, right? When I saw him give talk overnight in the House of Representatives, all by himself, all by himself. And then now you look at, he goes and has how many people come to see him because of all the work he's done. I cried because I realized this is like, this goes back to also working out, because it's something that keeps me going. It's about pace and the persistence and the patience to keep going and not give up, because it'll happen. And you got to have faith in yourself. Right. So that's like something that, where he's really inspired me. Right. And to see that. Absolutely. And then other people that I'll tend to look at is I get inspired by a lot of colleagues, I'm going to say, and see what they're up to. I enjoy going to LinkedIn to see what they're doing. I'm in a few women's groups, and I do that too. I go see what they're up to and meet with them on Zoom, but we find out what we're up to, and we keep each other going and appraised of what's happening. And then there's another author too, Antonio Demasio. He's another favorite of mine. He's a researcher.
He's a researcher. Antonio Demasio. I don't know that I've heard of him before. What type of research? Human behavior?
Yeah. So he does neuroscience.
Neuroscience, okay.
And he was the one who came up with what we have somatic markers. So he treated this guy. Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with the story, because he has got such a fascinating story.
But I've heard of somatic markers. But please share the summary with us.
Okay. All right. So this guy comes in to see him, and this guy used to be a stockbroker, and he had a brain injury. But what ended up happening is his life turned into a disaster. He lost his job, he lost his marriage, he got remarried to the wrong person, he lost that marriage, just everything, just shambles. So he goes to him to get treated, and come to find out, the guy couldn't make a decision. That's what he started realizing. Like, he'd ask him where to go for dinner, and he'd just go, well, we could go here, we could go there, we could go here, we could go there. And that's when Antonio Demasio realized that a part of his brain that works a lot with emotion was damaged.
Oh, interesting.
And so he couldn't process like the somatic markers in your body. That's when he started realizing that we make decisions based on our emotions and our feelings. right? So if you're in a situation and you're feeling like kind of queasy, it might be because it resembles something that happened before and your body's given you a red alert, don't do it, right? Like, or like, oh, this feels familiar. Yeah, this is okay, right? So however you're feeling, that gives the emotion and that helps you make a decision.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing those heroes and those brands that are surrounding your life right now. That's absolutely incredible. And I always love getting to know the person. I think that gives us a little glimpse into Mary. And I love that. I love what you're learning. I love the inspiration that you found from Bernie Sanders, from Antonio. What was Antonio's last name again?
Demasio.
Demasio. Yes. And wonderful, wonderful. Awesome, Mary. Well, as we wrap up the show, are there any parting words of advice that you would like to share before we close the show up?
Yeah, I would say, especially in this time, think about the relationships that you're having with your customer and also about the conversations when you're creating actually your customer community. All right. I didn't really talk much about community, I think, but the conversations with your customer and your company that creates a community and create that sense of community. Because like you were saying about people are interacting with brands now, right? You need that connection. People are dying to connect. So if you can find a way to do that, actually, that is going to be what's helping your revenue. So whatever you can do, right, to somehow engage these people, call them up on the phone, find your key customers, call them on the phone, find out like what inspires them and try to think about how do you pull them in and you'll be going.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mary. You've shared so much knowledge with us today. There are a lot of action items from this show that people can take away as they listen to it again and again, I hope. Thanks again for being on the show, Mary. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. This was fun.